Hey everyone, Mitch coming in for the Commander Score Studio. Welcome to the show. So on this episode, I'm going to be talking about Spiteful Banditry, a mythic spoiler that is going to have a big impact on Commander. And yeah, many are saying this card is pretty powerful, maybe even pushed. And some are actually saying that this wasn't pushed far enough, or at least, well, something on the card should not have been there. Now let's talk about all that. And yeah. Spiteful Banditry is an enchantment for X red. Enters the battlefield, deals X damage to each creature. On top of that, whenever one or more creatures your opponents control die, you create a treasure token. This ability triggers only once each turn. Okay, let's break this card down. My goodness. Now, actually, I will mention that there is a very comparable card to this one we'll talk about here in a little bit. But here we go. So essentially, this is a board wipe on an enchantment. Now, this is not a repeatable board wipe. This is one, well, I guess it would be if you could bounce it back to your hand or whatnot. Sure, then it is repeatable. But this is one that has an ETB that is going to take out a lot of creatures, again, depending on how much you put in that. So yeah, just a red damage-based board wipe. This is probably about the amount of mana that you're going to be spending, X, and red. If you just do X and red, usually it's a bit more restricted on what it takes out. That being said, yeah, take out a bunch of creatures. And the other part, though, is the key here. Hey, you also have the potential to make a ton of treasures, which, of course, over the years, we have learned that treasures are one of the most powerful things in Magic, apparently. Just, hey, who knew? Yeah, just giving everyone a lotus petal would be just, a bit powerful. Regardless, with this one specifically, again, it is somewhat limited because it says whenever one or more creatures your opponents control die, you create a treasure token. This ability triggers only once each turn. So at the maximum from this, unless you've got like Annoyed Procession or other things out that double, tokens, you are getting one treasure token. If an opponent's creature dies, any opponent's creature dies, doesn't matter how many there are that die, doesn't matter which opponents have creatures that die, you just get one. This only triggers once. And that text at the end of that, some players out there weren't all that happy with that text, apparently, and say that, well, maybe that shouldn't have had that text. I've actually seen a couple of places out there, actually Saffron Olive posted as well, that some people are upset about that once per turn restriction. But yeah, like Saffron Olive, I think that restriction should be there. Typically, yes, I am against those restrictions. I typically am against limiting certain triggers that it don't need to be limited. Now, this one definitely needs to be limited, in my opinion, or it would probably be banned right away because, well, this already can just generate you a certain amount of treasures in a game. I mean, this has the potential to give you one treasure per turn on every single player's turn. One trip around the table, 4 treasures. That is a ton. On top of this being attached to a board wipe, which again is already just going to give you one treasure. I mean, you're probably not going to cast this as a board wipe if you're throwing so many creatures out that you can take out, right? So already it's giving you 1 mana back, and on each turn, it's got the potential to give you another treasure as long as the opponent's creature dies. Now, you are obviously in red if you're utilizing this. You've got other ways to take creatures out. Yeah, you can do that. But again, the power potential of this could have been so much more if this, well, again, didn't have that restriction or didn't have the one or more creatures restriction or opponent's restriction. This can give you a ton of treasures in a game. It's already an incredibly powerful thing, and I'm glad that they limited it. Again, there are times when I don't like when they limit things like that one Golgari commander from Strixhaven that I think is garbage because they were like, yeah, let's just do activate on sorcery speed. I don't like those kind of limitations, all right? I don't like limitations that aren't necessary. This one is necessary, or yeah, in my opinion, if that wasn't there, this would probably be a card that'd be up for ban discussion pretty quickly because, yeah, they already just talked about banning Dockside. They didn't ban it. Maybe they should have. I don't know. But yeah, this one is along those same lines where this is an absurd token generator as it is an absurd treasure generator, but not as absurd as it could have been. Again, this could just, every single time, a creature dies and opponent controls, you could just be getting a treasure, essentially. If you just keep doing that again and again and again, if you got like Pyrohemia in play or whatnot, a way to just essentially keep damaging your opponent's creatures and taking them out. Oh, goodness. Or, Death Touch on Goblin Sharpshooter. That could also just, that's already a nice combo. But yeah, there are plenty of ways to just get a certain amount of treasures with this just throughout the game. This limitation was needed. Again, this is just on a board wipe too. So This already does a lot. I don't think it needed to do more. That's just my opinion, though. Let me know in the comments what your opinion is on that. But now let's talk about, what other cards kind of are reminiscent of this or where this kind of came from. And let's talk about what kind of commanders want to consider this kind of a card. So first up, I think the most immediate comparison is definitely the Meat Hook Massacre. And I didn't realize that this would probably be some kind of a cycle of some sort. I definitely didn't realize that, but apparently we might have a cycle incoming. And with that, just a quick note, the blue one better not be overpowered because, again, I've talked about how, like, these other ones, like, you really can't repeat this ETB in black very easily. You also can't do it in red very easily, but if you have access to blue, yeah, you got bounce effects. You can bounce it back to your hand and redo it. So, pretty gross. Regardless, Meat Hook Massacre. Legendary enchantment, X, black, enters the battlefield. Each creature gets -X until end of turn. So, again, basically not the exact same thing, but basically the exact same thing is like a board wipe on an enchantment, but with some additional text. Whenever a creature you control dies, you won't lose 1 life. Whenever a creature your opponent controls dies, you gain 1 life. This is a massive effect that, Riskrat style decks absolutely love, draining opponents when your creatures die, gaining, life as well. So that's a lot of fun. I mean, it's a very good card. Obviously, a giant, again, board wipe on an enchantment that also just does things that you want to do. Drain your opponents, gain you life. Yeah, there's a reason why this one is $38 in this brand new card. Very well might get up there pretty quickly as well, even, again, with that restriction. Now, obviously, another comparable card to this one somewhat is like a Starstorm. Again, like I mentioned, hey, this one, I guess, is instant speed, also has cycling, but still, again, X damage each creature for X red. Again, that's kind of like the going rate that you could expect to be dealing damage to each creature. Again, not having, a certain restriction on you, like ground creatures or flying creatures or whatnot. So that's kind of like the going rate. But again, this is basically this plus Meat Hook Massacre, kind of like combined with a slight twist, obviously, for treasures. So we shall see if we are getting more of these, enchantments that have, massive ETBs that also have, massive staying effects too, that just cost X and then their color. It's going to be very interesting. Again, we shall see. I mean, what would greens do? What would whites do? What would, blues do? I really hope blues isn't a board wipe. That would just be gross because, again, you could very easily bounce it back to your hand with many, many cards in blue and just say, okay, yeah, cool. All right, let's, bounce every creature back to their opponent's hand, that has X or greater mana value or whatever, or X or less. And then I'll bounce it back to my hand and do it again and again and again. Not that there's not a lot of ways that you can use and abuse board wipes in blue. That obviously would be the most abusable out of these enchantments. Anyways, moving on. Kind of like I mentioned earlier, this could have been like a Dockside Extortionist without those restrictions. Without the restrictions on it, have the potential to just make an absurd amount of treasures, well, right away without that first restriction, or just throughout the game, every single turn making absurd amounts of treasures. And yeah, definitely would have been up for ban discussion like Dockside Extortionist was, and I'm not saying it still is. I think they decided not to. I'm not saying that's a right or wrong call, but I guess I should read the card real quick for those of you that don't know about this lovely card. Enters the battlefield to get extra tokens or extra number of artifacts and enchantment your opponent's control. That is absurd. That is absolutely absurd on a 2-mana creature that has just this on an ETB, not even a cast requirement for that ETB, and then also the treasures come into play untapped. Absurd. So yeah, this new enchantment could have been just as absurd or nearly as absurd, and it's not. So that's a good thing. So it shouldn't be up for ban discussion, hopefully. Moving on, it was also kind of point out that, yeah, Revel in Riches does, this kind of thing, and it's not banned. It's not for ban discussion. Kind of. Let's talk about that. So Revel in Riches costs 5 mana. It is an enchantment. It says whenever a creature opponent controls dies, you get a treasure token. There is no restriction on this. It isn't, 1 or more creatures opponents control die. It is not, this ability triggers only once each turn. Oh, and also on top of that, beginning your upkeep, you have 10 more treasures, you win. Okay, that's a different factor of this card, but still. This one costs 5 mana. This new one costs 2. This also does not have a board wipe attached to it to actually take those creatures out. This does not have you, incentivized to actually just put mana into that to take creatures out to be a board wipe on top of just giving you a ton of treasures. And yes, Revel in Riches does have that win condition as well. Yeah, that's not really that hard to get to. That being said, this is just a giant target for removal. I mean, I guess this new one might be as well. It's probably not going to be nearly as much as it would have been if it didn't have that, this only triggers you only once each turn on it. That being said, yeah, this is the kind of value that can just kind of build throughout the game, a lot throughout the game. Again, just getting treasure after treasure after treasure. Yeah, we've seen examples of things that can give a lot of treasures throughout the game, and yeah, they're pretty gross. But yeah, this new card is definitely a step above Revel in Riches, in my opinion. Yes, it has more restrictions, but also it comes attached to a board wipe, and it is flexible. And if you really just want to get it down for just, a single mana in that X, you can, or just even no mana in that X if you don't really care about taking creatures out right away. So yeah, quite good. But now that we talked about, cards that, you might want to talk about, when it comes to what did this come from? What other cards are comparable to? Let's move on to talk about the commanders that might want to consider this card. And there are a lot of them. Again, this is going to be a very expensive card in my opinion. So if you have the budget for it in a red deck, it's going to be a consideration. I mean, again, it's just another great board wipe. But specifically when it comes to working with this card, yeah, Korvold Faker's King. Hey, did you know Korvold likes treasures? Who knew? 4/4 Dragon Noble Flying. That is enjoined. Says whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks sacrifice another permanent, whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a counter on it and draw a card. This is a perfect commander for treasures because, hey, you're tapping, you're sacrificing treasures. Great. You get mana, you get a counter on this, you draw cards. This can easily become a one-shot KO commander in absolutely no time. Also, every single time you sacrifice a treasure, you draw a card. So yeah, take your opponent's creatures out, draw cards, by sacrificing your treasures that you're gaining through this new card. It's pretty crazy in this kind of a deck. Spiteful Banditry would be very good with a Korvold deck with a commander that's already very overpowered. Moving on. Mono red. Obviously, mono red is a place for it as well. Magna Brazen Outlaw. 2/1 Dwarf Berserker. Other dwarves you control get +1/0. Whenever a dwarf becomes tapped, get a treasure token. On top of that, though, sacrifice 5 treasures. Go tutor for an artifact or dragon. Put it right into play. You can do some pretty crazy things with that. So yeah, getting more and more treasures, having another outlet to get more treasures is very good for a Magna deck. Again, yeah, you can go Dwarf Tribal, you can go, Artifact Heavy, you can go Dragons if you want. Whatever way you go, yeah, having a lot of ways to make a lot of treasures can be very powerful because, again, that is a repeatable tutor. That is pretty fantastic, and yeah, would be very broken if there weren't those restrictions on Spiteful Banditry. Next up, Galazeth Prismari, who can utilize treasures in a different way. 3/4 Flying Elder Dragon, enters the battlefield to get a treasure token. Artifacts you control have. Tap add 1 of any color, spends mana, only cast it in sorcery spell. Basically, again, this is going to be a token generating engine for you, an artifact generating engine for you with Spiteful Banditry. Cool. Keep those in play. You don't have to sacrifice them for mana if you're using them on instants and sorceries, so just do that. And now utilize them for big mana spells with a commander like this. Next up, this one you do have to be careful with. I mean, if you do have Indestructible on this, then you don't. Maybe if you got like Dark Steel Plate or, the new one as well on this. Cool. You can go ham with Spiteful Banditry. Throw off God of Fury, a 5/4 trampling god that says whenever a creature or planeswalker and opponent controls is dealt excess non-combat damage, throw off deals damage equal to excess damage to any target other than that permanent. Basically, get a bunch of X damage spells, or like Blasphemous Act essentially, but with this Spiteful Banditry, giant X damage spell, put a lot of mana into that, hurt your opponents a ton with this, or you just take out a lot of permanents with it essentially. Yeah, have a lot of excess damage just overflowing, hurting your opponents, kind of like trample for like damage spells essentially. And yeah, obviously on top of that, sure, just gain a lot of mana advantage throughout the game with your treasures. And finally, yeah, kind of like when it comes to having a one-sided board wipe, let's talk about something like a Sliver Hive Lord. Sliver, creatures you control have indestructible. Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of commander that can really take advantage of board wipes, can say, yeah, let's just make things pretty one-sided. So again, this kind of ETB enchantment that can take out a lot of creatures can keep yours are just fine. I mean, again, obviously it works well in like a more of a Spellslinger deck, one that, doesn't really have a lot of creatures, I should say, maybe one of those kinds of decks, Enchantress, whatever. But a commander that can actually say, you know what, my creatures are just fine. Do whatever damage you want to them. They're fine. They are going to stay, and your creatures are going to get taken out. So make sure you're keeping all of that in mind. There are different kinds of decks, obviously, that can consider Spiteful Banditry a very good card. And one that, in my opinion, again, I do not like those restrictions typically. I really am against restrictions for absolutely no reason, at least when I determine that there's no reason, in my opinion. This one definitely had reasoning. Again, treasures are already overpowered in many circumstances that, they went a bit far on treasures, right? They tried to fix a problem. They're like, okay, other colors don't have ramp like green does. Let's give other colors, and actually they're giving green it too, treasures and these kinds of things to make treasures. They kind of overdid it just a little bit. They're trying to pull back. It seems like they're still making things that make treasures, which I don't know if is really a good thing, but they're trying to pull back at least a little bit when it comes to being like, yeah, let's just give all the treasures. This one already does a ton. It needs those restrictions, in my opinion, or yes, it would be on the chopping block to be banned in pretty much no time, in my opinion. But yeah, I guess we'll never know because, it was made this way. It has that ability, this ability triggers only once each turn, as well as whenever one or more creatures you can opponents control die. It has those restrictions on it. You definitely needed those in my opinion. Again, it is a board wipe on an enchantment. Already, they can just give you a ton of treasures throughout the game. What else do you want? So yeah, that's just my opinion on Spiteful Banditry. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are on it. Make sure you're staying tuned to this channel for more quick takes and spoilers coming up. And with that, this episode is coming to a close, so let me know what your thoughts are on it in the comments below. And of course, as always, thanks again and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.